Hey guys, it's Chris Jones. Welcome back to another edition of the Art and Business of Writing podcast. Wow, can you believe it? We are on the verge of 2018. I still can remember 2017 starting, and even beyond. It's kind of funny when you have those conversations with people who have been around for a little while, like myself, who can even remember the turn of 2000, and just to see that, man, we're so close to 2020 already. And I remember growing up watching a lot of science fiction films about what life would be like in 2000 or even 2010 or even 2020. And ironically, it's nothing like science fiction. I mean, of course, we've got these really cool technological advances. We've got the Google Homes, which is one of those things that we got for Christmas this year. My wife and I got from our in-laws, well, from her parents and my in-laws. They gave us one of those Google Home Minis. And if you've ever seen one of those, I've always been a little leery about that. I kind of always joke that we've just invited the Department of Justice into our home. But I started playing with it. We were at their house, and the kids loved it. The kids were playing with it at their house. They're asking Google every question under the sun about every type of animal and its origins and about planets. And Google is just firing back with this answer and that answer and this answer. And then the thing will play music for you. It will turn on your television if you have a Chromecast. It will dim your lights. I mean, it does so many different things. You can hook so many different things into it. My boys even had a great time playing games with it. If you say, let's play trivia, Google gets really excited and wants to play trivia with you. And so it will create a trivia game where you can play, one up, or you can play with two people. And it's a lot of fun. The kids enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed watching them play. And it's kind of fun because, during the time of Christmas break, I'm trying to get some writing done, and typically my kids will run to me and ask me 15,000 questions. So Google can actually field all those questions for them now, and they enjoy listening to Google talk back to them. They ask Google the craziest things. But yeah, that's kind of our 2018 existence. Of course, there are lots of other cool technological advances. We've still got our smartphones, which can do a lot of amazing things for us, our computers, our tablets, but nothing quite like the things that we see or have seen in like Back to the Future or 2001 Space Odyssey, where we're doing insane intergalactic travel or flying with hoverboards. But I digress. I want to talk about today just some of the lessons that I've learned from 2017. 2017 is a completely different year than I thought it was going to be. I know for myself, I had some really different goals that I started with. And then as the year progressed, those goals evolved, changed. Some of them even dropped off. One of the big goals that I had for 2018 was that I really wanted to write for national publications. I was really focused on really getting my name out there, writing more stuff for big magazines, large websites. And I pitched several stories, and some even wrote me back. But as the year went on, I realized that wasn't what I wanted so much. I had been working on a book. I was on a co-authoring project that started the year prior, the end of 2016. And the deeper I got into co-authoring, the more I realized that I enjoyed helping other people to write and being on the ghostwriting side of things. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as the episode goes on, but it's something I want to encourage you with, is that sometimes the goals you begin the year with aren't the goals that you're going to finish with. So don't be discouraged. Don't kick yourself. Don't, look at your January goals from this year and say, man, I completely missed the mark. Really look at what the progress was that you've made, and did you make real progress towards your career aspirations regardless of your goals. I know a lot of writers do that. A lot of writers set out to do one thing, we end up doing something completely different, and we're all the better for it. So number one, the first point I want to make is just, if you want to have a better 2018, one of the lessons I learned from 2017 was to open up. Opening up really is just about getting out and living life. One of the drawbacks of being a freelance writer or an author who works from home is that you are indoors quite a bit. You spend a lot of time at home behind the screen. Maybe you've got your TV going on in the background. If you like to have background noise, you've got some music playing. But for the most part, it's a relatively isolated lifestyle. You don't do a whole lot. And I know one of the difficulties that some writers have, I even had it this year, was that I did gain a little bit of weight, which is kind of odd for me. I've got a really fast metabolism, but being at home, sitting down for so many hours and pecking away at my computer, I realized that I was being a little more sedentary than I normally am. So what I did by the end of the year was I got myself a standing desk. So now I've got the ability to stand up. So I'm not sitting as much. So it also makes me cognizant of being able to walk around more because I am on my feet. So I try to take stretch breaks. And one of the things that I do is I use a Pomodoro timer. And you can download any of those into your apps, or you can download it through the Apple Store if you use a Mac. But it allows you to set your work times. And so I typically do either 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, and then every four do a 15-minute break, or I do 45 15s all day, which is 45 minutes of focused work, 15-minute breaks. And then I pop in, pop out, and then I'll take, a half hour, a 45-minute lunch break before getting into the second half of the day. But opening up also is just writing out in public is something I love to do. And I know not every writer can do it, but one of the cool things that I've experienced in just opening up and writing out in public is the people that I meet. These people invariably kind of become your fans. So when you see them in public or you go to the same places to write, they're wondering what you're doing. They're cheering you on, which is really good for the self-esteem. It's really good for boosting your that feel good that you have that you need sometimes when you're sitting around wondering, am I doing this right? And then you see people in public who are just excited to see you out there. They ask you how your writing is going. They want to know what you're up to next. And it's a really great feeling. And it happens to me a lot when I go to Starbucks. I've got a few people there who know that I'm a writer, and they'll just ask me every time, hey, what's new? What are you writing about? What's exciting? And so it feels really good. But another thing is that when other people in that vicinity hear you talking, then they chime in. And I've made, I think this year, I made about $500 of additional income because of eavesdroppers. And I know that sounds funny, but it's the truth. When people hear you talking about writing, a lot of people don't run into writers very often. So people would ask me, hey, what do you write? And invariably I would say, hey, I write for publications. I write for magazines and I write for websites online. And they would pitch their stories to me. And if I found them interesting, I would pitch them to my editors. And if my editor found them interesting, they would assign the stories. And so I ended up making around $500 of additional income just from opening up. So I just want to encourage you in 2018, if you're someone who likes to write indoors, who's solitary, open up. If you can edit outdoors, if you can review your manuscripts out in public, find a public place and just meet people. Talk to the person across the table from you. Talk to the person who's standing in line with you. But really get out there and open up. Expose yourself to new things. Expose yourself to new people. But it's also just good for the soul to be out in nature rather than being chained behind your desk all day. Good for your health as a writer. Keeps you from getting into depression and discouragement and feeling that isolation that comes with being at home behind your desk all day. So that's number one. Number two, experiment. Something that I did this year towards the end of the year is I experimented with genre changes, not in my writing, but in how I consume information or what inspires me. Typically, what I like to do is I like to read a lot of websites. I'll go through it. I'll just read everything on websites or I'll listen to lots of podcasts. Towards the end of the year, I decided I wanted to try something different. I started thinking about parallels of what I do. So what's the parallel for an indie author? The parallel for indie authors are indie musicians and indie film. So I started experimenting, listening to more independent music and watching more independent film because I think a lot of the films that come through Hollywood just, for me, they just aren't as creative anymore. They're not as fun. They're full of CGI. They're full of just nothing but action sequences for the sake of action sequences. And a lot of the character development feels a little hollow. But what I've learned, and the same thing with the music industry, they're just putting out kind of this bubblegum syrupy pop music all the time without a lot of really thoughtful lyrics. But when I listen to indie music and I watch independent film, you can see that these people are the same as we are as self-published authors, as independent authors. They're trying to make their footprint. They're trying to become known. So there's more quality behind the lyrics. There's more time spent in putting together the sound quality for the song. And the same thing with the filmmaking. The characters are a little bit more developed. Plot has a little bit more structure, and they're a lot of fun to watch. And one filmmaker I really got into in the fall was Mike Flanagan. And he's produced some really great films. He's produced Oculus, and he's produced Gerald's Game, and he's produced several other films that I found on Netflix. And there's Hush was another one, which was fantastic. So I started watching some of these films and just getting lots of ideas, but it was good just to feel how people who are also indie do things. So it was an inspiring journey for me, and I definitely encourage you to experiment and also listen to podcasts that you typically don't listen to or styles that you typically don't listen to. Typically, I'll find myself listening to a lot of business podcasts. I'll find myself listening to a lot of writing podcasts. But this year, I decided to do something different. Towards the end of the year, like I said, as I was evolving and my goals were changing, I changed it up with the podcast too, and I started listening to more commentary style podcasts. So I was listening to more of things like Anna Faris's Unqualified, and I was listening to more of the Tim Ferriss podcast, and I was listening to more kind of storytelling types of podcasts, Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History. So just trying to get different flavors and hear the ways that people were delivering story was very helpful for me because that helps me as a writer to be able to not just hear story on a podcast or hear story depicted in music or see story depicted on film, but just have that full experience of experimenting with different mediums to inspire my own writing. So I definitely want to encourage you to do more experimentation in 2018 in order to really flourish next year. The next thing I did was I decided to go old school. This is something my friend Kayla Thomas, who was also my podcast host from time to time, we talk a lot about is just going analog, going old school, putting down some of the apps, getting rid of the screen sometimes, and really just getting back to old school writing, which is pencil and paper, getting back to old school planning, which is using a calendar. So just getting back to those things that are heavily visual based, heavily sensory based, which is, your hand and your eye touching paper and actually making impressions on the sheet. So go back to some old school tactics. Try to turn your phone off sometimes. I started doing that more recently is during the day, I'll turn off my alerts on my email. I'll turn off all my instant messaging apps. I'll turn my phone off and I'll go straight into just kind of a quiet mode. And it's been so helpful to have that focused time because I know they say that and there's science that backs it up that talks about just having quiet time to get work done because once you become distracted or interrupted once, it can take, up to 20 minutes to get back into that groove again. So preventing yourself from getting distracted by going analog can help you out a lot. And I even print out a lot of my manuscripts. So when I'm working on a manuscript or I'm working on a story, sometimes I'll print things out and I'll read it and I'll write in the margins just so that I can have that time away from the screen and physically be a part of the work. So think about going old school again. It's a great feeling. It's a lot of fun. Just yesterday, I went into my local Barnes & Noble and I picked up a 2018 calendar and it's paper. I want to go back to just using paper and I really want to focus on writing things down again because, again, I still use my Google Calendar, of course, for managing appointments and setting times for things. But as far as just tasking and just having the big picture things like my goals and deadlines for blog posts and podcast episodes, I want to see that on paper this year. I want to be able to look at my goals face to face, not electronically, but in paper, in perspective on a calendar. So that's what I want to recommend to you guys. Just as a lesson learned to move forward in 2018 is try to go old school. Find out some places where you used to be very old school and go back into that. But just figure out, what it is to be old school for you. The next thing, audit your life. This was huge for me. This is what caused the cosmic shift in my goals this year. As I went through the year, I began to audit my life. You see those memes that says, stop doing the things that you hate. I would look at that and kind of eye roll a little bit. Yeah, of course, stop doing the things you hate. But then as I audited my life, I started to look at, I was like, what do I actually hate? Do I hate anything that I do? Do I hate any of the processes that I have? Do I feel overwhelmed by anything that's causing me to dislike this part of the writing process or this part of the business of writing process? So I began to audit my life. I began to look and see where are areas that I can trim, cut, get rid of, and even delegate. If I don't like to do it, but I need it, can I delegate it? And so one of the things that I did was I built an entire Slack channel. And inside the Slack channel has all the contractors that I use for various aspects of projects, whether that's someone who's helping with email, someone who's helping with image work, it's someone who's helping with my website work. And so I just hop in the Slack channel and I tell them, hey, this is what I need on the website. They let me know. I pop into PayPal, make the payment, and it's all said and done. So it gives me a lot of my time back, but it eliminates me from doing things that pull on the creative process and keeps me from doing things that I simply just don't like. One of the things that I had to do this year, and it was a struggle for months. It took just a lot of just praying and writing things down in my journal, was I had to release a client this year. It was a client that I'd had since 2016. It was one of the first clients that I got when I was fired from my editing job. And This client was someone that we just had been rolling, man, just putting content together, building his web presence, building his audience. But it got to a point where I just wasn't enjoying the work anymore. I was kind of going through the motions. It wasn't work that I really liked doing anymore. It wasn't stuff that I enjoyed writing about anymore. And I felt like I wasn't being fair to my client by giving him the very best of myself. So I had a conversation with him and I just let him know that you have a great product. You deserve to have someone in my role who can help you get to the next level. I've taken you as far as I can go. I'd like to just pull out. And he respected that. And he said, hey, man, I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your candor. Absolutely. And so we mutually parted ways. But I realized, wow, this is a part of letting go of stuff you hate. And so sit down and audit the things that you don't like or things you don't want to do and just stop doing them. I know it sounds too simplistic, but I had to go through that. And it took me, like, I think 8 weeks, 8 weeks to get to that point where I actually had it in me to approach my client and just say, I can't do this anymore. But don't let it take you that long. There's a great saying that says, if it must be done eventually, do it now. And so if it's something that you know down the road that you're going to have to do, then just do it right away. Get it over with and move on so that you save yourself and whomever else attached to the project a lot of time and heartache down the road. So audit your life, dive in there, look and see what you can get rid of. Something else that I did also as I audited my life was I looked at, well, where can I cut expenses and move things around to actually have the tools that I want to be more successful. So for 2018, my word is content creation. That's it. That's my umbrella for 2018. I really want to focus on building a base of content and spending a lot of time in groups, developing relationships, so community and content. So what I did is I started to go through all of the apps and things that I have purchased, and I started to cut them out. Boom, boom, boom. Took them out, took all the money from those, and I started putting them into places that would benefit me. So I bought into Pat Flynn's Smart Podcast Player, which I can now take that and put it on my second site, Chris Jones Inc., where I'm doing a lot of my coaching and a lot of my journalism from and my ghostwriting from. So now I've got a copy of my podcast there. And so that investment came from me cutting from other things that I don't need. So think about places where you can cut costs in one area in order to reallocate your funds somewhere else so that this audit becomes something very useful to you. Because you don't need everything that we've got. We don't need to have every gadget under the sun, but just keep the things that are working for us and shed the things that are not. Really get back to simple, because at the end of the day, what you want to do and what I want to do is I just want to write. And so if I can remove everything else that's counterproductive to writing or that's a distraction to writing, then that's what I want to do. And that's what I want to encourage you to do as well, is to just audit your life and see what you can get rid of. And here is the biggest thing that I did in 2017 that I want to encourage you with is I niched in. I decided to take a very large gamble towards the end of the year. They always say the riches are in the niches. That's something that I learned when I was a member of BNI years ago, that if you are trying to really earn lots of money doing something, learn to niche in, learn to find your place in the market where you are the best at a particular skill and really hone in on that skill. Another one of those little cliche statements is be specific to be terrific. So the same thing, the same idea of just being very specific. So if you're trying to do everything well, you're not going to do anything well. And I realized that I was trying to do so many different things. I wanted to be a coach, and I wanted to write articles for different publications and make money, and I wanted to ghost write, and I wanted to do so many different things. And I realized, okay, I need to pull all this stuff back in and focus on where do I want to be dead on specific? Well, one thing I know I love to do is I love creating content for my podcast. So I love to podcast. So 2018 will be a very big year of podcasting for me, where I really put a lot of attention and effort into improving this podcast to be able to give you more value, more content, and really just be more transparent in the shows. So that's one thing. But number two is I really want to focus on carving out myself in the ghostwriting space and in the co-authoring space, being able to help authors to write their books and coach them through it if they want to, writing with them or writing for them. So that's really my main focus. And so I want to niche in. And so when I made the decision to niche in, it was very scary because I was making decent money working with various numbers of clients. And so what I had to do is I had to start to pull back a little bit. Like I said, I let go of one client. And then I changed up the way that I worked with another client so that I could free up all this time to start putting into looking for ghostwriting clients. And so I had to go on my website and I had to change up all of my messaging on my website. I had to update all of my social media. And I said, okay, I'm going to go in. And it took a while. I'm not going to lie to you. I was terrified to go all in. I was terrified to niche in. I was terrified to just say, okay, this is what I do. I write books and I ghostwrite and I coach. That's it. It was a terrifying thing to do, I promise you. But it's been gratifying because once I started to do that, something in my mind changed. And all of a sudden, the messaging that I started to share on my social media started to reflect the change that I had made. And then before I knew it, I started getting more and more PMs on Facebook and LinkedIn from people who wanted to learn more about what I did. And I started getting more and more people scheduling discovery calls with me who wanted to talk about how to write their books. And as a result, I began to get more clients in. So when you start to niche in, it's that whole thing of when you let go and you open your hands and let go of what's in your hands, you open yourself up to being able to receive more. And so I want to encourage you next year really to think about niching in. If you think you're doing too much, or you think you're trying to overserve a community, you're trying to stretch yourself too thin, or you're experimenting in almost in the wrong way where you're trying to be everything to everyone, I want you to think about what's that one area where people say you're a rock star in, that one area where people say, man, I love it when you do X, Y, and Z, or I love reading when you read it, when you write about X, Y, and Z, and they really start to niche in. You can always rebroaden down the road. I mean, you have authors who write fiction and nonfiction and write various things, but niche in first and really carve out your space as an influencer. It's time for you to make that step too. It's something that I've thought about a lot. It's not about the fame at all. It's not about any of that stuff, but it's just really about me being the best version of myself doing what I love the most. And that's what I want from you in 2018 too. So these are my lessons from 2017. I'd love to hear what some of your lessons were. Feel free to hop onto the post and comment. You can find the post at www.readywritelaunch.com/ABW068. And I'd love to hear from you. And guys, that's a wrap.